Sato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste to everyone. Welcome to the 17th session of Atmabodha. The verse with which I would like to start today is it's a mantra directly taken from the Mundaka Upanishad. Very profound. You might have heard of it. Na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam nema vidyuto bhanti kutoyam agnihi tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. What it means is the sun does not shine there, nor the moon, nor the lightning. That shining, Brahman shining, all these shine. And it is in the luminosity of Brahman that all these become luminous, as it were. This mantra is giving us a very profound description of how Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta understands the object-subject relationship. How exactly do we perceive an object? An object is always perceived in the awareness. Isn't it? In awareness you perceive an object. So subjective awareness, the subject primarily is responsible for perception of the object. And as the subject is equipped, so will be the perception of the object. That is why such descriptions are given. That shining, everything else shines. Everything else, it becomes cognizable due to the presence of Brahman, due to the presence of awareness, pure consciousness. And anything is grasped, known, becomes perceptible due to the presence of consciousness. This is what is being meant. Behind the mind is a source of pure light, pure consciousness. That shining, or everything else shines. This is the description being given. So the next verse which we are going to study in Atmabodha deals with this. See, it is so interesting even to just think of it. There is that beautiful description in the Kenopanishad, Yat chakshusha na pashyati yena chakshumshi pashyati tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate, which means that which enables the eyes to see, but which cannot be seen by the eyes. That is that Brahman, that is that pure consciousness, and not this that people worship objectively. So what enables our sense of vision? Anybody would say, well, mind, the visual cortex in the brain and then the mind. But the text is telling us there's something even behind the mind. What makes the mind conscious? It is consciousness standing behind the mind. In its ambit, all this is happening. Due to its presence, everything is functioning. So this is what is being said. What they are actually trying to tell us is the structure of experience is being explained here. The structure of human experience. There is a subject, and that is why objective perception is possible. And the next verse of this Atmabodha is actually going to give us this idea. That's why I'm bringing in this here. As an introduction to that verse, let me tell you a story from the, this is well not a story, it is a conversation between Janaka and Yagna, which comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This conversation is very interesting. Janaka, as you know, was a Raja Rishi, a king come Rishi, and a man of realization who was also a king. And Yagnavalkya was a Brahma Rishi, a knower of Brahman who lived a secluded life of a Rishi. Now these two met in Janaka's palace and this conversation ensued. So Janaka asks Yagnavalkya, can you tell me what serves as light for man? In what light does one see objects? Now, in those times, there was no electric light. So obviously, Yagnavalkya said, well, it is sunlight. It is in the light of the sun that one sees objects. Then Janaka says, in the absence of sunlight, what is the light through which one sees objects? Yagnavalkya said, why moonlight? In the absence of sunlight, there should be the moon. Then Janaka says, in the absence of moonlight also, what would serve as the source of light? Then he said, fire. You would light a fire, a torch, isn't it? In order to see objects. Suppose there was no source of brightness anywhere, you would light a torch. Today you have your mobile torch. In those days, they had to light a torch actually. They had to use fire. And through that, they had to see objects. Then Janaka says, well, suppose you have no means of lighting a fire. Suppose you can't light a fire. Then what would serve as light for man? Then Yagnavalkya says, why speech? I would make my way through the world through the power of speech. I would ask whatever I wanted to know. Even through touch, I can make my way. So speech and touch serve as light for man in the absence of all other sources of light. Then Janaka says, suppose you are not given to speaking and your sense of touch is inactive, then what will serve as light? Then Yagnavalkya says, why consciousness? Just if you are conscious, being conscious is the light. Light is a metaphor, as it were, trying to tell you that just being conscious, you will find your way through anything. Consciousness is the primary light which you use to get your experiences in this world, to have objective perception, to live your life. Consciousness is primarily the light. And it is due to the presence of consciousness that you even acknowledge sunlight, that you perceive moonlight, that you can light a fire, you can use your senses. Consciousness is primary. This is what is being, repeatedly this theme is there in the Upanishads, just to point out how exactly the human mechanism is functioning. See, we are not used to thinking like this, so these ideas appear very novel to us. But if you actually live more of a mental life and even stop the thought process, this will become very natural. This understanding will come naturally that there is a source of consciousness in us, whether you call it Atman, Brahman, whatever. But the very fact that my mind has conscious experiences in this world means somewhere there is consciousness. The gamut of our conscious experience is what is meant by, you can't even say gamut of our conscious experiences, the source of our conscious experiences. That is what is meant by consciousness. And it can never become an object. If it becomes an object, it is not consciousness. Please see this also. It can only be the subject. It can never become an object. That is why the very nature of knowledge of the self is different. Knowing the self cannot be an objective encounter with something, however subtle. It can only be being and becoming. And that is what is being said here in the next verse of Atmabodha. So isn't that conversation between Janaka and Yagnavalkya interesting? See how step by step they are taking us into the fact of our consciousness. So this verse, 61st verse, Yad bhasa bhasyate arkadi bhasyair yattu na bhasyate yena sarvamidam bhati tad brahmeti avadharayet. Realize that to be Brahman, by the light of which luminous orbs like the sun and moon are illumined, but which cannot be illumined by their light, and by which everything is illumined. So you see, again and again, same idea is coming up. They are illumined by whose light? Ultimately by the light of consciousness. See, if you were not a conscious being, the sun shining in all its glory, the moon shining in all its beauty, would that mean anything? Because you are a self-aware entity, the entire creation means so much. So consciousness is at the heart of experience. This fact is being pointed out. They shine due to this light. Cognizability comes because of the presence of Brahman, because of the fact of awareness. This is being pointed out through all this. So here, even Nikhilanaji Maharaj has given this verse from the mantra from the Mundaka Upanishad, which we studied. And Brahman is, see, last class we covered this point. Brahman is responsible for existence, consciousness, and bliss. Isness, the fact of something being there, is due to Brahman. Cognizability, knowing, perceiving, is due to the presence of Brahman. And attraction, priya, something becomes dear to you because of the presence of Brahman. So this is what is being described in this verse. Let's go to the next one, because all these three verses are connected. You see the next one. Swayam antarbahi vyapya bhasayan nakhilam jagat brahma prakashite vahnivat taptayasa pindavat. The Supreme Brahman pervades the entire universe outwardly and inwardly and shines of itself, like the fire that permeates a red-hot iron ball both inwardly and outwardly and shines of itself. How beautiful, you see the example that is drawn. Fire that permeates a red-hot iron ball both inwardly and outwardly shines of itself. So an iron ball, this is a common example used in Vedanta. It can become so hot, it becomes indistinguishable from the fire. Now that hot iron ball requires the heat of fire to become what it has become. But the fire does not require the iron ball, isn't it? To emanate its heat. The fire is independent in itself. But heat is not intrinsic property of the iron ball. It is borrowed heat from the fire. So also, everything in this world is borrowing existence, cognizability, and attraction or being from the self. But the self is independent of everything. Brahman alone is, everything else is a manifestation of Brahman with a name and form, borrowing its existence and being from Brahman. This is what is being said. So this is even in Bhakti Shastras, this is very beautifully described in various ways. Vedanta is usually, by Vedanta people understand Advait Vedanta. That is the last step of Vedanta. You also have Vishishta Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta, which means a dual way of understanding all these concepts, a qualified monism, that way of understanding these concepts, and Advaita is absolute monism. So in the dual systems, they understand this in various ways. Let me give you a sample here. How exactly they describe, the Supreme Brahman comes to us as the Purusha, as the avatar, you can say, as the being who is complete in his knowledge of Brahman and yet having a human form, radiating human emotions, human attitudes, human thoughts, engaging with this world in a human way, but his own being is rooted in Brahman. So this is what is commonly described as the avatar. While speaking of Sri Ramachandra, recently I was studying the Ramayana, and there, this is how Sri Ram is portrayed. This is how he is shown. See, he is the perfect manifestation of Brahman. He is Ishvara. He is the highest reading possible of Brahman by the human intellect. That is why he embodies this supreme truth in completeness in his form. This is how the personal God is described in Bhakti Shastras, in devotional scriptures, which usually deal with this dualistic form of Vedanta, Dvaitavad, what is called. Now, how is he described when he enters the court? You know, Sri Ram was the son of Dasharath, and he was a great king of Ayodhya. When Sri Ram enters the court of Dasharath, it is described that all of the courtiers who were sitting in that court, all the people who had gathered there, the ministers and the people, and the king himself, at once, there, the lotus of their heart bloomed forth. Their anahata chakra, as it were, bloomed forth. Because of the power of Sri Ram. Sri Ram is complete Brahman, the supreme Godhead in a human form. So when he steps into the court, everybody's heart lotus blooms, as it were. Tasya bhasa sarvamidham vibhati. This is how they describe it. By his light, everything becomes luminous. Even in Krishna's description, this is there. In some particular version of the Mahabharata I read, when Krishna entered, before he came to, once he was a peace messenger. He came as, in order to have a dialogue with Duryodhan and his team, and of course his father, in order to make peace between the Kauravas and Pandavas so as to avert the war. Before he comes to Hastinapur, Duryodhana has expressly ordered all his courtiers not to stand up when Krishna enters into the court. When Krishna enters the palace, everybody will keep mum and nobody will stand up to show him any extra respect. So this is an order. And then when Krishna actually enters the court and Dhritarashtra is sitting there and Krishna moves towards him, suddenly Duryodhan sees that all the courtiers have stood up. Everyone who gathered there, all of them have stood up and folded their hands in deep respect. And then as soon as then the conversation takes place, and then there's a huge drama there actually. Many things happen. And then finally Krishna leaves the court. After he's gone, Duryodhan tries to assert his arrogance and tells them, I had ordered, none of you will get up. Why did you stand up and greet Krishna when he entered the court? And then they said, but my lord, you yourself stood up. We just followed you. When Krishna entered the court, we saw you got up from your seat and you folded your hands. So then it is described that this is the power of Brahman in human form. Tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. By his glory, by his nature, he sort of makes every heart luminous, every mind becomes more sober in his presence. In his presence, even a wicked person becomes respectful. He loses his arrogance. So all in these ways it is described. The idea is this, just like how your well-trained mind has great power over every other mind, so also a man who has transcended mind, who has got the knowledge of Brahman, has great power over everything, even inanimate objects around him. He, as it were, by his luminosity, he makes everything luminous. He illumines the four quarters. This is how it is described. So in various ways, these verses have been described. You see, Nikhilananji Maharaj writes, Brahman is the only reality that exists. All is Brahman. Anything that is not Brahman is an illusion. So this is being described in verse number 63. Please go there because that is the heart of Advait Vedanta, what we will next discuss. Jagad Vilakshanam Brahma Brahmano Anya Nacha Kinchana Brahmanyad Bhati Chain Mithya Yatha Maru Marichika. Brahman is other than the universe. There exists nothing that is not Brahman. If any object other than Brahman appears to exist, it is unreal like a mirage. Because how is the object perceived by Advait Vedanta? As a manifestation of Brahman with a particular name and form, that's all. So there is nothing called an object apart from Brahman. Just like how there is nothing called a chair apart from wood. Wood in a particular name and form is called a chair, isn't it? For some time, see, to grasp this, you must forget the idea of chair for some time. Just see the chair and acknowledge that it is all wood. And then bring into your mind a particular name called chair, a particular form, the form of the chair, and then it will suddenly manifest only as the chair for you. It is all training of mind, transcending the limitations of the mind, which is, the mind is conditioned to think only in terms of name, form, function. So we are seeing only objects around us. Actually speaking, this perception is born of mystic experience. It's a experience of oneness, unitary consciousness present everywhere. But logically, this is how it is to be understood. Just like how a chair is nothing but wood, a pot is nothing but clay with a name and form. So also, this world is nothing but Brahman with names and forms. That is the only reality that there is. That is why you see the sum and substance of Advait Vedanta is Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. The Brahman alone is real. That is the truth, unchanging truth. And Jagat Mithya. The world is unreal. In what sense? Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. It is nothing apart from Brahman. It has no existence apart from Brahman. Apart from awareness, does anything have existence? No. So it has no independent status of reality. So it is Mithya. That is the meaning. We have messed up with this word Mithya for quite a long time. If you read the history of India, you will see the interpretation of this word Mithya, Maya, simply saying Mithya, Maya glibly, without understanding the tatparya and the tattva behind it. It has done a lot of harm to our culture. Simply saying that this world is an illusion. That is not what is meant here. Mithya is a very technical term. It means to say nothing has existence apart from your awareness. So give it its due. It is name and form superimposed upon a substratum of awareness. So it is Brahman in a particular form. This is what the Jiva is. This is what any life around you is. And that is why this word Mithya has been used. The thing as it appears to you merely is a Mithya. As Brahman it is Satya. So see Brahman everywhere. That is the idea. And how we have messed up this word Mithya, I can't tell you. Anybody who's depressed will suddenly declare the world is Mithya. That is, you see, to come to Vedanta, you really need a very high level mind. Not a depressed mind. Not a mind which has not been able to face the difficulties of life and overcome them. A very strong, noble mind is required to come to the existential truth about human life. Psychologically messed up people cannot come to existential reality. That is why first we always prescribe yoga to change the nature of the mind, to help us handle our psychological problems. A depressed mind, then you must make it a healthy mind first. Don't come to Vedanta straight away. This is only for the healthiest minds. Because you are going to see reality as it is. With fear, anger and anxiety in you, you can't see reality as it is. So Vedanta is directly teaching us the existential truths of life. All other systems are going to help you handle your psychological truths, psychological realities of your life, which alone are dominant in most minds. That is why Vedanta appears like some abstruse, abstract philosophy. So first, correcting the ways of our mind and generating a really healthy mind. What is a healthy mind? that which is happy by itself, that which seeks the source of its being by itself, that which has naturally got the power of great and clear inquiry, that which is pure, that is a healthy mind. That which is not dependent on somebody to keep it engaged and a little happy, that's a sickly mind. So the first step of spiritual life is generating real mental health. And for most people, that is all that they need. You see, today people are asking for life skills. How to live a good life, how to handle the mind well. So first thing is to learn that. Once we generate the really healthy mind, then this will just strike us, what they are telling us here. That the existential fact of life is Brahman. It is awareness. It can be realized through a process of intuition, a direct insight into it. And that is Vedanta. So you see here the example which he gives is the example of a desert. The mirage which he's talking of in the verse, the example which Nikhilanaji Maharaj gives is the example of a mirage in a desert. So many of us have seen this, I'm sure. When I was traveling in Canada 2 years back, I got this experience which was really amazing. Wherever we traveled, the air is so pure and clear. You always felt that like the water, the roads were all full of water. And as if there has just been rain. Everywhere I used to see the roads like that. And it was a mirage actually. Created by, that's why the air there, Canada and US is so close to Canada. So I'm sure you have such experiences when you're driving fast. The road appears to be well watered. There's water all over the road. It's a mirage, but it appears so real. When you actually drive and go close that, the road is as dry as ever. There's no water there, but it appears like that. So also this is the example given that just like how even if you go into a desert, this will become very clear that here and there you see water. And you go into a little more into the desert and you see oasis. So all these experiences only show us that, see, the mirage that you are seeing is not separate from the desert, isn't it? Is there a separate reality called a mirage? Mirage itself means illusion. It is nothing but desert appearing, manifesting as a mirage to you at that point of time. So he is saying, similarly, this entire creation is a manifestation of Brahman in different names and forms. So it's like a mirage. It appears like that. But you will not know this as long as you are standing there in the desert. It is only when you look around and see that there's only desert everywhere. And this oasis can be a mirage. Until that happens in your own mind, you will absolutely believe that there is an oasis there. So we will believe the world to be absolutely real until we get an intuition of Brahman, until we look for the desert, which means we look for the reality of life. Until then, these names, forms, all this will keep us busy. Isn't this true of our lives? Check and see. We are busy with a whole lot of things because we don't know the existential truth about human life. So this is being reiterated again and again, that the world is nothing apart from Brahman. Nothing has objective status apart from Brahman. See, these are all very huge statements to make, isn't it? Very grand statements. Nothing has objective reality, they are telling us. Everything can be reduced to a more basic substratum, and the final substratum of everything is Brahman. So everything is an appearance in Brahman. This is being said again and again. Even as everything that you may see, which appears as a mirage to you, is nothing but the desert, so also all of this, what you are calling creation around you, is nothing but Brahman. in so many appearances. So this essence of Advait Vedanta, let me give you some ideas on how all this has developed, how this Advait Vedantic stand developed. I told you there are 3 steps in Vedanta. The Dvait Vedanta is there, Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta is there, Advait Vedanta is the ultimate step. In Advait Vedanta also, there are 2 schools of Vedanta, 2 schools of Advait Vedanta. They are commonly called the Vachaspati school and the Vivarana school. Vachaspati school is also called Bhamati school and Vivarana school. These are 2 separate schools of Advait Vedanta with certain very important differences between them. But the philosophical framework is the same. Both of them are schools of Advait Vedanta. So briefly, we will just discuss this in order to help us understand the next verse. What these 2 schools are about. This Vachaspati school, it belongs to a person called Vachaspati Mishra, who lived in 19th century AD. Sorry, not 19th century, very sorry, 9th century. Just after Shankaracharya's time. And he is most famous for his commentary on Shankar Bhashya on Brahma Sutras, which means Shankaracharya wrote a magnificent commentary on the Brahma Sutras, and Vachaspati Mishra wrote a commentary on that commentary. And how did it come about? That's also an interesting story. Vachaspati Mishra was very well known in his time as an unbiased master of all Indian systems of thought. In Sanskrit, we say Sarvatantra Swatantra, which means he was a master of all systems of thought and very independent. So a great exponent of many of the Shad Darshanas. He has also written works on Sankhya, on Vedanta, of course. You see, this whole school of Advait Vedanta, it is named after him. Vachaspati school, it is also called Bhamati school. There is a reason for that, because when he started writing this, his great magnum opus, which is the commentary on Shankara's commentary on Brahma Sutras. See, those of you who have seen the Brahma Sutras, they are extremely abstruse texts which are giving you the logical support of the Upanishads. They are all in aphorisms in that form. They are sutras and very difficult to understand. So Shankaracharya wrote a masterly commentary on these Brahma Sutras. It forms part of the Prasthanatraya. And in order to make it easy for us to understand Shankara's commentary, Vachaspati Mishra wrote a commentary on Shankara's commentary. Now, how did he write this? He was a man of great austerity. And right from an early age, Vachaspati Mishra was given to much meditation. And he would dive into his meditations, and the understanding born of that, he would record. And that is how he wrote these commentaries. And it went on for many years. In fact, his entire youth, you can say, because he was married at a young age, Vachaspati Mishra, and his wife's name was Bhamati. And he totally, after marriage, they decided that he would first complete this work, this very important magnum opus, which was a commentary on Shankar Bhashya on Brahma Sutras. So he dived into it, and he was so completely absorbed in it. And that wife also was such a noble lady. She served him throughout this period, completely selflessly, without any demands on him. And so he could complete this. And when he completed it, he actually saw that he was long past his youth. The story goes that one day, when he was almost towards the end of the commentary, he was writing it. I told you, every day he would sit in meditation. The insights he got out of that, he would record. And that's how the commentary developed. So one day when this was happening, it was evening time, and a lamp was in front of him. Suddenly there was a gust of wind, and the lamp blew out. And then he saw everything was dark. He could not see anything. His commentary was just lying there. And then he saw that somebody came and lit that lamp. And then he saw it was an old woman. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I am your wedded wife." That was Bhamati. One version of the story is she also helped him in writing this commentary by discussing concepts with him. But we don't know now what exactly is the truth. But the thing is, her sacrifice was so great. This Bhamati is a real masterpiece. In fact, when I first read it, I was in tears. It is so beautiful. Some points are really, they just grip your mind. It is luminous, I would say, this entire commentary, because it is born of deep insight, meditative insight. And when she lit the lamp and withdrew, then he realized what had happened. Years had passed in this work, and he had totally ignored his family life. And then he called his wife and said, "Look, my dear, your sacrifice is great in the creation of this work. So I give this work your name." And he called it Bhamati. This Bhamati is a magnificent commentary. You see, it is also a beautiful commentary on the greatness of this womanhood, Indian womanhood of those times. You see how totally dedicated to intellectual striving and meditation they were. Never once the thought of a family life came into their minds. For the simple reason, completely absorbed in this. So this is one way of purifying our entire life. Intellectual absorption will make you forget everything. For an intellectual, this is the best sadhana you can do. That is why the Taittiriya Upanishad says that teaching and learning, this is austerity. It delivers complete engagement of mind. So this is the story of Vachaspati Mishra and Bhamati. Once he named that book, the work Bhamati, even the school of Advait Vedanta based on that book came to be called Bhamati. So Vachaspati's school is actually called Bhamati. So there are two main schools of Advait Vedanta. One is this Bhamati school, and the second one is the Vivarana school. And thus Bhamati became immortal. It reminds us of the life of Holy Mother Shri Sharda Devi, isn't it? So, you see, I would just like to point out a few differences between these two schools of Advait Vedanta. For those of you who are interested, you can dive into Bhamati. It is very refreshing an experience, I can tell you that. And I'll quote a few passages from Bhamati here to help you. Now, first let us just see what distinguishes these two schools. See, Bhamati mainly has an ontological approach to reality. This school of Advait Vedanta, it is focused on reality. What is the nature of reality? Vivarna school has an epistemological approach. The Bhamati school, it holds the jiva is the source of avidya. Ignorance lies in the jiva. But Vivarna school holds that ignorance lies in Brahman, because jiva is after all just an appearance. These are some of the differences. One, the most important difference I would say is Bhamati recommends nididhyasan or meditation as the main means to Brahmagyan, and Shravan as an aid to that. Shravan is hearing text, lectures, YouTube talks, all of that is an aid. But the actual method is only meditation, nididhyasan, what is called Vedantic meditation. But Vivarna holds Shravan is the main method. Just by hearing, you can generate insight. And Vivarna school holds meditation can be used as an aid. But Shravan is the main method. Bhamati holds the main method is meditation. Shravan, hearing is an aid. Hearing Vedantic text can only be an aid. So these are the two differences between the two Advaitic schools of Vedanta. These are the two main schools. There was another school, but today the living philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, you can say these two schools are living even today. And I would also like to add here, there's a lot of yoga mixed up in Advaita Vedanta. The living philosophy of Advaita Vedanta has elements of yoga. This happened since the 14th century AD. If you historically try to find out how this came about, because in Shankaracharya's time, it was Shuddha Advaita, you can say. Later on, yogic elements over the centuries got added to the philosophy of Advaita, especially after Yoga Vasishta was introduced as a Advaitic text. This happened in the 14th century AD. Yoga Vasishta deals with both yoga and Advaita Vedanta. I don't know how many of you have read something of Yoga Vasishta. It is just illuminating, captivating. Stories within stories and all leading you to Advaita Vedanta and using techniques of yoga. If you actually want to understand Ramcharit, you must go to Yoga Vasishta, not just Ramayana, because the story of Yoga Vasishta it is that knowledge which the Rishi Vashishta, who was the Kulaguru, the preceptor of Sri Ram's family, he gives it to Sri Ram when Sri Ram wanted to renounce the world at the young age of 16, they say. Just after he returned to Ayodhya after his education, the story is that Sri Ram withdrew from everything and was found in his room, constantly in meditation and withdrawn from the world. And Dasharath got very scared. What has happened to my son? Is he going to run away from the world? So he calls his preceptor, sage Vashisht, and asks him to advise Sri Ram to come into this world. He is going to be the next king. He is the crown prince. How can he withdraw from the world? So then the conversation that ensures between Vasishta and Sri Ram is Yoga Vasishta. It's really very beautiful, but it's a huge book. Sometime you can go through it. So this Yoga Vasishta became an Advaitic, you can say, got incorporated into the philosophy of Advaita sometime around the 14th century AD. I did some research on this and found all this. And then it influenced a whole lot of writers on Advaita Vedanta after that, which includes Sadananda, who's the author of Vedanta Sar. It includes Vidyaranya, who's the author of Panchadashi. If you read his book called Jivan Mukti Viveka, it has a lot of elements of yoga and Advaita Vedanta mixed with it. So you see, this will naturally, even Vivekananda's insistence on Nirvikalpa Samadhi. If you have read the big life of Swami Vivekananda, written by his Eastern and Western disciples, there you will find all these incidents. Why Nirvikalpa Samadhi has been prescribed as a means to Brahmagnan is because, again, the coming together of yoga system and Advaita Vedanta. So you see, this whole tradition has come about like this. A lot of elements, because when you are climbing a mountain, whatever helps you, you will take it into your grip, isn't it? So also when you are climbing this path towards Brahmagnan, whatever is an aid, any form of meditation, anything, any practice which will help you, any prakriya, you will naturally take it into your stride. So that is how yoga got integrated with Advaita Vedanta. And today we easily use it. We easily combine the two. So this is how we have to understand the history. This is something of the historical background of these systems which I have been giving you. But in all these verses, you see, Atmabodha is a work directly from Shankaracharya. So naturally, he is going to stress only on Advaita Vedanta in all of the verses. Please go to the next verse, 64th verse. Drishyate shruyate yadyat brahmano anya na tadbhavet tattva jnana cha tad brahma sachidanandam advayam. All that is perceived, all that is heard is Brahman and nothing else. Attaining the knowledge of reality, one sees the universe as the non-dual Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. See, the knowledge of reality, what does it give us? One sees the universe as the non-dual Brahman. Everything that you perceive and hear is nothing but Brahman. This is the crux, you can say the essence of Advait Vedanta. Pratibodha viditam matam, the Upanishad says, which means in every act of perception, in every mentation, in every feeling, in every act of will, intention, motivation, attitude, in anything that you do, it is nothing but Brahman that is getting revealed. You are missing it all the time because of your preoccupation with mental modes. Who is it that is enlivening that mental mode? It is Brahman. What is that light of awareness which enlivens thought? It is Brahman. What is it that makes your feelings so real? It is Brahman. What is it that appears as people and objects around you? It is Brahman. But you have created a world apart from Brahman. This is what happens when you don't see the substratum of existence. We are seeing only names and forms. And our psychological reality has become the dominant reality of our lives. We don't know anything apart from this. So that is why the insistence on first getting this reality orientation, getting a hold over the actual basic fact of your existence. Then only you will be able to relate maturely with this world of manifestation. This is what is being repeatedly said. Attaining to reality, one sees the universe as Brahman. See, the whole cycle of this Advait Vedanta has been put very briefly by Shankaracharya himself in one of his commentaries. He says, how is it that you start this cycle of samsara? It is because of ignorance. You don't know your real nature and you know yourself to be something apart from your real nature. You don't know the self, you know yourself to be body and mind. This creates adhyas, superimposition, which means you are superimposing what you are not upon the truth of your existence. Adhyas leads to attachment. Superimposition leads to a certain delusion of your intellect, which leads to attachment to this body-mind complex. That generates action. As a result of karma, karma phal is generated. The fruit of action will come to you. Once you start expecting fruits of your actions and they come and fall upon you, samsara starts. This is how the jiva gets bound, according to Shankaracharya. See, it's a very graded process and it's very true. Check your own life and see. The whole problem lies in ignorance of our true nature. When I don't know I am the self, I will know myself to be only the body and mind. So the whole story starts from here, the story of our bondage. So this is how they are trying to understand the great enigma of human life. Beyond our psychological problems, beyond our psychological reality is a deep existential truth. To arrive at it, one requires sadhana. I'll go to the questions. Okay, the first question, I will just make it very brief. It's a long question. There are so many problems in today's world. What is the solution? And then he has given a list of problems and They are very destructive by nature. And what is the solution to corruption, violence, all this? So you see, where does war begin? Where does corruption begin? Violence, where does it begin? It begins in the human mind, isn't it? Does it begin anywhere else? If the human mind was not there, nature would be very happy. Nature would thrive. The human mind, wrongly conditioned, full of negativity, that is the core cause for all these problems. So without working on our minds, how are we trying to solve our problems? You can't solve these problems just by fixing the outside. So there is corruption in society, create a few more laws. That is not the core solution to the problem of corruption. What is it that makes the human mind corrupt? Trying to find out an answer to this, that would be a real solution. What makes the human mind corrupt? It is human greed. So then, how do we check greed? That the solution lies there. How to control violence? Not by multiplying our police force. What makes the human mind violent? It's our lust and anger. Are we checking these? The solution lies here. Isn't this pretty obvious? But why don't we do it? How can you try to find solutions to these problems on the external front? They are in the human mind. So the solutions are internal. We have not created an atmosphere of peace for the simple reason the mind is not used to peaceful states. The mind is violent by nature. So the changes must first come here. It must first come in our educational apparatus, where we are able to give our children a taste of higher emotion, where we are able to give our children a taste for the higher things of life. Today, there are a whole lot of discussions going on all this, because India's new education policy also has come out. It is so very important to introduce practical measures like learning music, so that you feel the sense of calmness that music generates. You feel a certain sense of harmony in your mind. It is important to bring in fine arts, even if you are a science student. It is important to introduce some form of worship and prayer in our homes on an everyday basis, so that our children get good vibes around them. It is so very important to expose our children to good habits, good reading, a mature level of programs which they can view, not just cheap stuff. Because ultimately, please remember this, the solution to all these problems lie with the human mind, and the mind has to be trained and cultivated for that. It won't come just by enforcing more laws and multiplying our police force. So the next question is, one shloka number 59 tells us that all objects are pervaded by Brahman. All actions are possible because of Brahman. Somehow, to understand this, the mind immediately links to attributes, because objects, actions have a concept of name and form. So this is the nature of the mind, to link something abstract to attributes. So you can proceed this way. That is why we have the concept of Sagun Brahman, Sakar Brahman. But ultimately, it is Nirgun Brahman alone. It is what they are trying to tell you is consciousness is at the heart of experience. To understand this, stilling of mind is required. So you can take the help of divine attributes to overcome the undivine attributes, but ultimately diving into reality means knowing Brahman or reality as it is. Verily. If you study your own psychology, you will understand this phenomenon very well. When do you want a very loving God? Tell me. When you are seeking love. When do you want a very compassionate God? When you simply need compassion. When you need a powerful God, when you want protection, then you will worship a powerful God. Suppose you don't have any need, you will learn to worship God as He is. So Brahman that's why I told you it is for the healthiest mind, which has no need. It is seeking reality for its own sake. Such a mind alone can grasp reality as it is. So I don't know how this will be taken, but this is the actual fact of life. The next one is, we will always link any understanding of name and form to experience, and experience has to be beyond gunas, therefore only perceived through neti neti. That is right. See, it is only through neti neti, not this, not this. This is a common method, a kriya, prakriya used in Vedant, which can only negate, you can describe Brahman only through negation and not through affirmation. You can't describe how it actually is, but you can show what it is not. It is not name, it is not form, it is not energy, it is nothing that we can perceive through the senses. It is not mentation, it is not emotion, it is nothing you can perceive through the mind. What is it? That now you have to find out by the process of neti neti. Not this, not this, not this, not this. This is called the method of negation. So if you go on removing everything from your mind, what is will remain over. There is no need of searching it out. It is ever there. You have filled up the mind with a whole lot of clutter. So neti neti is basically to unclutter the mind. Isn't it? Practically, that is what it amounts to. Today, you just see today. Look at your thoughts for today. And see what is going on in your mind. The whole day, what you have remained busy with. You will see a whole lot of things. Maybe the house, the family, your friends, some party somewhere. Your mind has been busy with all of this. So what does this neti neti do? God removing everything one by one. So that you are not caught up in all sorts of trains of thought, which are meaningless to your actual research, existential research. So when you remove them, whatever is there, awareness will remain over. So this is the whole point. The next question is, Adi Shankaracharya emphasized Brahman is real and the world is false. This is the concept of Advaita philosophy. However, Thakur preached both to be real. How one can reconcile this concept and make the belief strong in the right path. So, Shankaracharya says, Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya, what we read today. But Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. The world is false as an independent entity in itself. But it is not false as Brahman, name and form superimposed on Brahman. So, when Thakur says the world also is real, he is making this kind of a statement only. The world is real in Brahman. The world is an expression of God. This is how Sri Ramakrishna saw it. That this, you see, best way to explain these things is go to the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. How does he see the world? In so many ways he has described it. He is not seeing the world as we are seeing it. He sees it as a manifestation of God consciousness. He says the world is soaked in Brahman, even as like how the city becomes when it is soaked in rain. He says this, like that I see the whole universe is soaked in Brahman. Only consciousness is there, appearing as so many things. So it is these things which we have to catch. That is the meaning of Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. The world exists as Brahman, as an appearance in Brahman. So both of them are not saying two different things. Please see. Shankaracharya, if rightly understood, is not saying something different from what Thakur is saying, what Sri Ramakrishna is perceiving. All men of realization will teach the same thing. Sab siyale rakra, we say. In Bengali, there's a saying. So all of them will speak the same language because the point of realization they come to will be the same. So if you dive into sadhana, you will understand what Shankaracharya is saying is not different from what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. But if you just intellectually try to understand, it appears like, oh, they are saying two different things. This is the difference between intellectual understanding and experience. So I think let's stop here. Time is up. I will end with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhaga Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.